All right, so we've been very fortunate to have some very accomplished filmmakers on Filme Shilmy, and whenever I see a piece of cinema that is so compelling that actually, in a way, persuades me to really bring that filmmaker on and delve into that movie and to delve in to that content to underline the ramifications it has, the process behind making it is a very satisfying feeling. And today I'm so delighted to have with me Rahul Ravindran, who is the director of The Girlfriend on Netflix, and it's been the talk of the town for a while now. And absolutely powerful performances by Rashmika Mandanna and Dheekshith Shetty, and I'm very delighted to be doing this. And Rahul, I'm not sure if you've done many UK interviews. I think this might be amongst your first initial ones.
Pretty sure it's my first. Yeah, pretty sure. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. There
Well,
you go. Yeah.
well, thank you so much for bestowing this honor on us. That's
Oh,
very
not at
nice.
all. It's my privilege, my pleasure. It's just so amazing to talk to someone that the film resonated so deeply with. That phone call that you made after you watched the film, it just made my day, and I have no doubt that this conversation is going to make my day as well. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Definitely, for sure. I think, The Girlfriend comes at a very opportune time of Indian cinema because with Sayara and so many other films that have performed extraordinarily well at the box office. Intense stories. Love stories are also a part of it, but intense stories, Divaniyat as well is another one, which, have really seemed to have struck a chord with the audiences. And they've always seemed to have done so, even if we look back in the days of Tere Naam and all these other films that have done well. I'm sure even in South as well. I mean, the original Tere Naam as well in South, which did very well as well.
Yeah.
So I think, Rahul, what is it about the girlfriend really sort of tugging at this particular string of emotion and really how comes it's deeply resonated with so much? Is it because it's kind of tapping into a sense of turmoil that I think the generation of today, when it comes to romances, that they're kind of enduring in today's day and age?
Right. You know how it is when you want to tell a story, you're not thinking so much in terms of what impact it's going to have, how it's going to land with audiences. You're not really thinking in terms of how they're going to respond to the film. Sure, you have a notional idea. Like when I set out to make this film, I kept telling myself, hopefully it'll start conversations. Hopefully it'll drag into the mainstream certain conversations that aren't a part of mainstream. That's it. That's all that I was thinking about. Um, every decision that I made, every creative choice that was made came from me looking inward into the story and what I was trying to say and what meaning I was trying to construct, right? So I am also the film released about a couple of months back. It came out on Netflix about 3 weeks back. I'm just taking it all in. I am also yet to unpack um, why the whys and the hows of the reactions and things like that. But I've just been taking it all in, absorbing it. But what I think there seems to be one commonality in a lot of the reactions that I get from especially women and lots of men who with whom the films resonated so deeply is that they keep saying, finally, someone's made a film that has given that's given words to our silence. That's the one common, phrased differently in different languages, but that's the one commonality of the reactions that I've gotten. Some of the deepest, most heartfelt reactions that I've gotten. Um, what I can tell you is that when I was writing the film and when I was making it, one of the creative choices I made was that I said to myself, I don't want this to be a film about extremes. I don't want this to be a film about a guy who physically abuses or who verbally abuses or who cheats on his girlfriend. The obvious red flags, which allows people, because those kind of cinema, they need to be made too. Those are stories that need to be told too. Or if you even take it past the breakup in the film, a guy who would go all the way to the point of an acid attack or an honor killing. We've seen stories like that, but those are more black and white where it's easy for people to say, yeah, this is wrong, right? The space that I wanted to keep the film in was the thousands of microaggressions that you have to face when you're stuck in a relationship of this nature, and the toxicity of that and the impact of that on a human being, and how that starts shrinking your identity. So I wanted to stay in that zone. So one of the things I told myself first up was that, like, fascinatingly, the reason Rashmika made this film is because she kept saying, "This is my big hug to all boomers out there, and I know there are tons of them out there." And the reason I was making this film is that I said, I'd like five Vikrams, five Vikrams to go back home, reflect, and think. Whether they change or not is not in my hands. I don't want to make a film to change them. I want to make a film that gently prods them to go back home and reflect and think. And I said, my job would be done, and it would be a win for me if five Vikrams go back home and think, right? So, so for me, the first thing I told myself was that I will write Vikram in a way where I don't give Vikram sitting in the theater and watching this film a chance to disassociate themselves with Vikram, because I've taken it to an extreme where they say, yeah, but I don't do that, so I'm okay. I'm not going to give you the space to say, oh, I don't do that, so I'm okay. I'm going to operate in a space where I give you very few reasons to disassociate yourself from Vikram. So I think that I was very clear about. And that was the reason for the creative choices I made. And how that's landed now is people keep coming back and telling me nobody makes a film about these in-betweens. We get lots of
Mm.
cinema about the
Yeah.
extremes,
Yeah.
right? That it's very easy for us, for all of us to get together and agree and say, yeah, you know what, that's wrong. But nobody makes cinema about these in-betweens, especially from my Telugu audiences. That's one feedback that I keep getting from women and some men in the two Telugu states. They keep saying you've given words to our silences, because this is something we've never been able to express. We suffer it silently, and it becomes a part of our lives, and it starts changing the core of who you are as a person. And I think Rashmika kept telling me, she kept saying, "I know what the script did to me when I read it. You've written it as a man with second-hand empathy, but I don't think you get what this is going to do to women when this film comes out. You'll watch, you'd see it for yourself," is what she kept telling me, and I'm seeing it now. So yeah, I think you make honest creative choices based on the story that you're telling and the meaning that you're constructing. And the beauty of it is that if you're successful in creating life,
Mm.
and if it starts hitting home, and you're able to at least momentarily forget that you're watching a film, then it starts taking a life of its own in the hands of the beholder, in the hands of the viewer, right?
Mm.
And that's been beautiful to watch. I'm just sitting back and observing and absorbing and taking it all in. So I don't know if that answers your question, but does it?
Yeah. No, it does. It does. It does and more, actually. And I think this is what's really, truly, really beautiful. And I think it's interesting as well because I think some time ago I saw a film called Baby in Telugu, which
Okay.
actually showcased the female character to be the toxic one. The sort
Mhm.
of the sort of characteristics and vices that we despise in Vikram in this one, we kind of see
Mhm.
that in the lead female protagonist of Baby. And like you mentioned, I think it's so nice that we've got a versatile range of cinema, but you've got
Yeah.
characters that are now emerging that are unafraid to be great, because that's exactly what sort of psychology is and sociology is. It's not just black and
Right.
white. And
Right. Right.
for academics, it's good because you need to have a for and against in your discourse. But in actual society, it's all gray, isn't it? There's always that middle ground where one can, navigate or not. But one thing that I do love about Rashmika is her sense of agency.
Right.
The fact that, she's often played these characters from what I've seen of her work who endure, but they have agency. Um,
Right.
and Dikshith, I absolutely, who I also, again, wonderful, wonderful artist and very, very
Oh yeah.
love him. And I watched his Kannada film called Blink. And
Ah, right. You told me you did. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and one thing that I love about Dikshith as well that I have found is that he has this very innocent looking face. But then as you watch him and as he plays, like sort of as his character unravels on screen, you realize there are layers and layers and layers to his character, which are often veering into the dark territory. Um,
Mhm.
is this something that really stood out to you, when it comes to their characteristics as artists as well?
It's interesting you asked me that. there's only one thing that I look at when when I'm approaching an actor for a role or when I'm casting, and it's not just the lead roles, it's all the other roles as well, um, which is the eyes. I have a very clear idea of what kind of eyes I want when I'm writing a screenplay, and I look for the eyes because everything else about an actor you can change. You can change the way they walk, their accent, you can change the way they talk, the way they dress, their gait, everything else. You can't change the eyes. Like when it came to my first film, for example, it's a film called Sheila So. And I remember when I was writing the female character, I was very clear about one thing. It was the role of a 23-year-old girl who's wise way beyond her years. There is a certain maturity to her that is way beyond a 23-year-old girl. And she's had certain circumstances in her life where she has a wall, and that wall is her defense mechanism. And she doesn't like people getting through that wall, right? An invisible metaphorical wall, so to speak. So I was very clear that I wanted a girl who looks young but has a melancholy in her eyes that she can't erase. That there is a certain tinge of sadness to her eyes even when she smiles. So this is how I look to cast for my roles, right? When it comes to Vikram and Bhooma, the one thing I wanted with Bhooma, I was very clear from the word go, is that if you look at the first half of the film, Bhooma's character is very passive. Circumstances and characters are acting upon her, never the other way around, right? And she's sort of getting pushed and prodded into a certain stream, and she's getting carried by that stream, and she doesn't really have the agency to stand up and say, "Hang on a second, this is not the direction in which I want to go." So the first half of The Girlfriend is essentially a collection of Puma's reaction shots, if you look at it. And she is my protagonist. I'm telling this story through her perspective, but it's largely reaction shots. So I was very sure. The second half is a bit different, of course, when she starts coming into her own. So I was very clear that I wanted the actor playing Bhuma to have very transparent eyes. It might sound very ambiguous, but I know a pair of transparent eyes when I see one. Some people are born with poker eyes, where whatever the feeling within, you just can't get a clue. You just don't know, right? They look the same. You put them in any situation, even if their emotions are very heightened. It could be joy, it could be pain, it could be anger. You look at their eyes and you won't know. Um, for Bhuma, I wanted someone where, because she doesn't get to express herself, she doesn't get to say much. I wanted someone who has such transparent eyes that as much as she tries to hide it, she can't because her eyes give it away. If you just care to look, you know in her eyes what she's going through. And Vikram never cares to look, right? Because he's not even bothered. So for me, Rashmika was a perfect fit in that sense because I very affectionately call her headlight eyes. She has these incredibly piercing headlight eyes
She
that
does.
are so transparent. Not just Bhooma Devi, but Rashmika in real life as well. She has a massive problem because she can't hide what she's going through. You will see it in her eyes if you care to look,
Mm.
right? So that was Bhooma for me. Like the minute someone popped the idea of Rashmika playing it, obviously I'm so glad and grateful she said yes. But I was like, this just clicks because the girl has transparent eyes. And when it came to Deekshith, I wanted a guy with very sharp eyes where if he's smiling and saying the most sinister things, the smile is still very evident in his eyes. And you
Yeah.
realize this is not a guy thinking it through. He's just playing by his instincts. And this is who he is. He has very sharp eyes. I don't know how to, again, I know it sounds ambiguous, but how I thought of Dikshit was that I saw an interview of his that he was doing for a film that he was promoting called Dasara.
Mm.
And and he looks very different in the film, but he was doing an interview where he was in a very different look. But I was looking at his eyes, and he said, "This boy has very sharp eyes, and it's exactly what I want." So that's how I cast. That's how these two guys popped into my head, and I said, "You know what? He'd make a great Vikram. She'd make a great Boomer." So I know it sounds very ambiguous, but I hope that makes sense.
No, it makes absolute sense, and I'm glad you mentioned Dasara actually, because again, that was a very layered performance again in that film as well, and honestly, I both the actors did such a tremendous job, and I felt
They
very
did.
happy
They did.
because I feel like I've
They
kind of
did.
followed their journey, and it's really
Yeah.
really wonderful to sort of.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you short there, but I have a very simple definition for who a great actor is, right? I don't care what your method is. I don't care how you pitch your performances. There's some actors that are loud. There's some actors that are very inward. I don't care. It's okay. To me, great acting is someone who, on a big screen, in a dark hall, when you're sitting and watching them, are able to make you feel something when you look at their eyes. It's the eyes. It's the eyes, Chico. Nothing else matters, right? It's how you can talk with your eyes. It's how you can say the unspoken things with your eyes. Nothing matters more. So the eyes are a beautiful gift for any actor, and they come in all shapes and sizes and varieties, and that's what's fascinating. And when you're picking and choosing an actor for a role, that's why I look at the eyes and nothing else. So yeah, it's there's some magic in sitting in a dark hall and on a 70 screen, watching an actor, looking into their eyes and getting a peek into their soul. And if that soul is filled with feeling and emotion, where an actor has been generous enough and humble enough to allow another character to come and inhabit them, so that through their eyes you get to see only the soul of the role they're playing and not the actor himself or herself. That's when the magic happens. So yeah, yeah.
Beautifully articulated. And I think I'm gonna use that आंखों में का जो आपने वर्णन किया है. I'm gonna sort of delve into that a bit further because I remember mentioning to you that there's that one scene where Bhooma meets Vikram's mom, and
Right,
to her shock and horror, she also finds her to be very subdued, almost a victim of misogyny and abuse in her
right,
domestic life as well. And the way she looks into the mirror and her eyes are widened in horror, where she almost kind of foresees her future had she married Vikram. And I thought that
right.
was a very powerful scene. In fact, I even mentioned to you that this reminded me of Get Out, Jordan Peele's Get Out, where
You
there's
told me
literally,
that, yeah.
yeah, there's like a scene as well where literally Daniel, the main actor's eyes are literally like that, and literally the camera just slowly moves out. I mean, I don't know if these were like some of a deliberate or intentional representations or not. I don't think they were from what I remember you told me, but there was
I
that.
haven't seen Get Out yet, so yeah, it's
So
certainly not,
definitely not
yeah, not
intentional then.
influenced by Get Out, yeah. Yeah.
Also, I think I remember mentioning to you as well that there was the scenes when you were trying to showcase or exhibit her inner emotions, like the one where she's having a shower and the walls are closing in, या फिर एक ऐसा scene I think जब वो मतलब लेटी हुई है and like the tree roots are like sort of tying her up. I'm describing it very vaguely because I just saw the film some time back, but um
Right.
it's these artistic representations and portrayals that you have to showcase
Mm.
the inner turmoil of the character, which
Mm.
was a very Stanley Kubrick-esque as well for me. I remember I
I
again
mean,
and it just so happened that I watched Eyes Wide Shut as well not so long ago. So I think anytime
right.
I think I see any artistic representation of an inner turmoil of a character, I immediately associate with Kubrick, whether or not that filmmaker chooses to follow that path or not. So
Right,
again, these are
right,
just
right.
like things that just jump out at me as a cinema goer and as a film watcher. But that necessarily might not have been the case for you. Who would you say was actually a reference point for you from a filmmaking perspective for this?
Before I answer that question, the fact that I've been mentioned in the same sentence as Kubrick, I mean, I, like job done,
I
man.
mean,
It feels like
छोटा
I
मुंह
just
बड़ी बात because he's a legend, right? But you know
I
what
feel
I
like
mean.
I'm holding an Oscar right now and giving an acceptance speech. That just
Very
means so
proud.
much to me. So many of his films are some of my all-time favorites. So yeah, it's just you made my day, man. Like I don't care about the context, but just the fact that I got mentioned in the same sentence as that man just made my day. But yeah, coming to answer your question, no, I honestly none of those shots that visually represent what Boomer's going through came from. hey, I want to shoot it like that filmmaker or this film. Um, I, I'm the kind of guy. In fact, you know what? I was constantly struggling with should I do something like that? Because my natural grammar as a filmmaker is to not put visuals in the film that where the director's popping and saying, "Hey, look at me, I'm a cool director," right? So I have this filter where I'm like, "Ah, no, don't." You know what? You do this, people are gonna like, "Ah, that's such a well-directed scene," and I feel like that's like an insult. The minute someone watching a film says that's such a well-directed scene or the director's done a good job, I feel like I've utterly failed there, right? So I'm very careful to not include these things. When it came to this film, it's so ironic because it came from necessity, where I'm like, okay, I'm stuck with the mirror scene, for example. We'll get to all these three that you mentioned one by one. The mirror scene, for example, I said, here are two women bonded by a silence.
Hmm.
That silence is so essential to the nature of their suffocation, right? The fact that you can't talk about it because gaslighters, they're so good at these microaggressions seem so harmless to begin with. And they usually have an amazing reputation where a woman goes and says, you know what, I'm not happy in a relationship with him because he's doing these things to me. One, they'll feel like, is this really an issue? Aren't you overreacting? Number one. And number two, they tend to treat women who they believe they possess very differently from other women around them and from other men around them. And people generally be like, what? Really? Are you sure he's such a great guy? And then you start doubting yourself. You wonder if you're neurotic. You wonder if you're overreacting and you start going silent, right? That's like gaslighting 101, right? So for me, these two women are bonded by the silence that they share. And it just felt utterly wrong for Bhooma to have a realization that comes through dialogue with the mother. It just felt wrong. It just felt, how can I get these two women to sit down and talk? It just feels wrong. So then, how do I get this across that Bhuma goes there, looks at the mother, and realizes this could be her future? And it came from necessity of, hey, you know what? How would it be if if the mother, who it's a side of her that's been buried for so long, thinks this is the girl who is going to come into this household and be my company and spend the rest of my life with me, and it'll be nice to have a companion. What if I give her a glimpse of what I was like as a child? And she gives a photo album that has photos of her childhood. And then I was like, but I can't get them to talk. So the whole mirror idea, where I'm just going to keep switching focus between the two without cutting in between, it's one single shot, came from that necessity. How do I get this dynamic through on screen without getting these two women to talk and verbalize it? Because it just felt wrong, right? So this is how I arrived at that mirror shot, for example, and then from there, um, Bhuma. So one of the first things I told Rashmika when we were prepping for the role is I said Bhuma was raised by a father where by the age of 5 or 6, this girl's immediate response to anything thrown at her, it could be something as simple as, hey, Bhuma, do you want to eat at this restaurant? Do you like the food there? Or do you like these clothes? Do you want to buy them? Or do you want to watch this movie? It's playing in a theater right now. Something as simple and basic as that. Her first reaction to that isn't, do I like it? Do I not like it? Do I want to do this? Do I not want to do this? Her first reaction to everything is, will I get into trouble with my dad? Will he be upset with me because of it? Then I'd rather not. So, having grown up like that, I told her, because your first reaction to everything is that, you're not in touch with your own feelings. And because you're not in touch with your own feelings, you can't express them. But they're there. You have the EQ, you have the IQ required to know that there are feelings there, but you're not old enough and you're not mature enough and you haven't come into your own yet to understand what they are, to process them consciously, and to be able to express them, right? So, so here is a complex psychological situation where a girl like that is having a realization and she can't ignore these feelings anymore. She knows it's there. It's all over her gut. It's occupied the very depths of her soul. and she can't look away and she can't ignore it anymore. She can't keep acting like things are hunky dory with him. And yet, because of her nature, because of how she's been conditioned from a very young age, she can't express them to anybody else. She doesn't even know where to begin. She doesn't even know how to articulate it. So then I said, she needs to be isolated when I am, and that also comes from how meticulously Vikram isolates her, right? Harshita, as it is, she's very introverted, so she makes all of two friends in that college. Vikram cuts one guy out actively, proactively. The other girls just too damn polite and courteous to sort of start receding anyway because she's like, hey, she has a boyfriend now. So let me not take up too much of that time. And the third person, she makes a new friend in Durga. And ironically, Vikram doesn't even have to do anything about it. Durga honestly opens up and tells her this complex situation. And in her agitated confusion, not knowing which way to lean, Bhooma makes the horrible choice of literally, if you remember the end of that scene, shaking off Durga's hand and going and holding Vikram's hand in the next scene. She
Mm.
makes the wrong choice there. So, ironically, for Vikram, he would have had a tough time cutting Durga out of her life, but Boomer does it for him. So I have this character who's now isolated. So I can't have her sitting down and expressing these things verbally to another person saying, you know what? I can't ignore these feelings anymore. I'm not happy in a relationship with him. I can't fool myself anymore. So again, it came from the necessity of how do I convey to an audience visually that this girl is strangulated, suffocated emotionally, and wants out, and she can't ignore these feelings anymore. So then it came like Bhooma being Bhooma, she's lived her life out being the person that her dad wants her to be. And Vikram's now replaced that father figure in that college. So she's now living her life out being the person that he needs her to be. And literally the only space that she has to call her own is that shower cubicle. It's not even her room because he's invaded that room,
Yeah.
right? Even that is his territory now. So I said it just makes sense to take her inside that shower cubicle. And then from there came, what does it really feel like to someone who's stuck in a situation like that? It probably feels like walls are closing in. So then, hey, that's a great idea. Let's take her to a shower cubicle. She wants cold water on her head, which hopefully her head's heated up and there's a thousand thoughts racing, and she doesn't know how to calm them down and hold on to one thought and process it. So she wants cold water in her head. So all these things felt like the most natural thing she would do. And I felt the best way to visually represent it would be through those roots that sort of engulf her, that entwine around her, and to get her into the shower cubicle. Incidentally, the roots wasn't on paper when I wrote it. Um, there was supposed to be something else there where I said, yeah, you know what? It was like a repetition of what happens with the mother, where she's walking in a dreamlike scenario towards the grill gate in Vikram's house, and she sees this, she sees the mother in a sari. She goes and taps on the shoulder, and the mother turns, and it's actually her. But I said, no, it just doesn't make sense to do that again. So this college that we were shooting in had this very interesting looking banyan tree where either because the soil had eroded or they had built uh, pavements around it, or I don't know why, but the banyan tree had all its roots out in the open rather than it wasn't even hanging. It was, I don't think it was a banyan tree, whatever tree that was, it had these giant octopusy roots that were out in the open on the ground. And I remember walking to another location. This was right outside the hostel where we shot Booma's room. I remember walking around, I looked at her and I said, damn, I like that. You know what? I want to put Booma there and have a top angle shot of the Jimmy going down on her and coming up on her. I think I might want to use this in the interval montage, the intermission montage. So that's how. You might have watched a version on Netflix which doesn't have intermission, but the bathroom scene, that's the intermission point of the film, right? So that's how that idea came about. But the shower cubicle idea came about through necessity, not through me saying, hey, I want to make a shot like Kubrick, or I want to
Mm.
represent this like some cool director I watched or some cool film. So it came from the necessity of I'm writing a protagonist who can't express herself. So if she can't express herself, how do I visually convey this? So does that make sense?
No, it does. It does. No, thank you so much for breaking that down. I think it really does make sense. And I think if anything is to go by, like conditioning is such an important aspect of this film, and I think it really, I could feel that pain that she went through. When it went to the S word shaming that she went through as well in the college, when they painted some horrible, horrible things about her as revenge, and the whole sense of not letting go. This very interestingly, I now that I'm thinking about it, like I look at three strong female characters from this year, from three very accomplished films. Like in Sayara, you had Vani Batra, for example, who was still suffering from the clutches of a narcissistic ex who basically abandoned her for his own ambition and his own growth. Then you have Sonam Bajwa's character in Divaniyat, for example, who is forced to take drastic steps because she's fighting with someone very powerful who just can't accept a simple no. And similarly, what Bhooma goes through in The Girlfriend, she's also going through this whole sense of a guy who just cannot let go. And I feel like this whole idea of obsession and narcissistic abuse and um, you know, manipulation of highest order, coercion, these are very themes that are very rampant in our society at times. And even if you take the love, like sort of guys away from it, from any relationship, it's very rampant in today's day and age, Rahul. That must, just knowing that, and I think acknowledging that, it must have frightened you a little, surely, as a filmmaker as well.
Um, it's interesting that you asked me that. It did frighten me until I actually went to the sets. Not frightened so much, but it didn't even discomfort me because I'll tell you why.
Mm,
Um, the seed idea of the film came from that. I mentioned this in a few other interviews, but for the sake of our UK audiences, I'm going to say it again. I was in college and I had a friend of mine, this great guy. He's a brother's brother. He's a friend's friend. Like I haven't spoken to him in 25 years, and if I call him and tell him I'm in trouble, he'll catch the next flight and he'll be here. I know that for a fact. Um, that kind of guy, and he had a girlfriend on campus, right? And we we didn't really know. We still don't know her side of the story. We don't know what happened. But at some point, when we were still on campus, she broke up with him. And I remember for the next 2, 3 nights, he was sort of alternately raging and extremely emotionally vulnerable. He'd be breaking things in his room 1 minute, and he was drinking through the night, and he'd be breaking things in his room 1 minute, and he'd be a bawling mess and just sobbing his heart out 1 minute. And this was going on for about 2, 3 days, and we just sit down with him, keep consoling him, and making sure we're there for him and things like that. And about 4 or 5 days later, in the middle of the night, at about 2:30, he came to my room and he said, "Come with me." And there were four others with him. And I said, "Where?" And he said, "Just come." And he'd been drinking, and he went to the students' gents' toilet and took out a permanent marker and wrote that girl's number on the wall, and above it wrote for sex contact.
oh my God.
Uh, Now, any Indian man who's been to any public gents toilet anywhere in the country will know what I'm talking about. You see so many of these sketches of women, their names written, sometimes for revenge, sometimes as an expression of love. Very weirdly, why you would want to go express your love in a toilet, I don't know. But I'm sure many men have read for sex contact with the number below so many times. Some of them are actually sex workers, sort of promoting what they're selling, which is okay. But some of them might be these stories. I've always wondered after that incident. And
Mm,
we knew right then and there that there is nothing we could tell him that would appeal to him rationally because of how heightened his emotions were. And we knew that if we said something where he started looking at us also as villains, if we somehow antagonized him, there would be nobody to control him,
mm,
right? Um, and this stayed in my head. And many years later, I was watching this movement in cinema, in Indian cinema, across the South States, where there was a certain kind of cinema getting made again and again, which was glorifying the pain of the Devdas, right?
mm,
Which was very empathetic to the pain of the Devdas, but They were now taking the Devdas beyond being a Devdas into what we call soup boys here, right? Now, the difference between a Devdas and a soup boy is that a Devdas drinks himself to death and destroys his own life,
Yeah.
which is heartbreaking. I wish he wouldn't, but that's what he does. But the soup boy goes one step further, drinks himself to death, destroys his own life, and says, "You did this to me. I'm suffering because of you, and I will have my revenge." And that revenge was being viewed through the lens of righteous revenge.
Mm.
It was either advertently or inadvertently being justified and often even glorified. And even if it wasn't being glorified, because it was being justified, a lot of the audiences were clapping and cheering wildly for it, and they were then doing
Emulating
the
it. Yeah.
glorification. They were then doing the glorification on behalf of these films. And I'm not being judgmental here. All kinds of cinema need to be made. I'm somebody who believes that freedom of speech must exist on both sides of any argument. If you get to make your cinema, you are nobody to decide this is the only justified perspective. You need to get cinema from the other side as well. And I believe it's justified. And I believe what is healthy is that these films come out and they trigger conversations and discussions and debates, and we all get to talk to each other respectfully, which usually doesn't happen, but we can all hear each other out and choose to maybe even politely agree to disagree, but at least we are now exposed to the other point of view. We've heard the other side, right? So coming back to so the seed of the film was these two things coming together in my head, and I said a Vikram who is 21, 22, 23, who's not a child anymore, who's not a boy anymore, but he's not a man either. He's in
Mm.
between,
Right.
right? And if he's been raised in an extremely patriarchal environment, he has no chance of being any other way. This is exactly how he's going to be. And in a weird way, it's not even his fault, right? Which is why I go back to I wrote this film and made this film because I wanted five Vikrams to go back home and think and reflect. So I look at a Vikram and I say, buddy, I know, I understand why you are the way you are. It's not just your environment at home, it's what we've constantly reinforced through cinema, through lyrics, through poetry, through literature in your growing up years. And in your head, it's normalized, it's justified, it's even glorified. So how else are you going to be? I get it. So now everything else is imaginary, right? This became the trigger thought. This became the seed thought. Everything else is imaginary. So I said, I want to write a Vikram who thinks, hey, I never hit you. I never screamed at you. I never abused you verbally. And I never cheated on you. I am the world's greatest boyfriend. What possible reason could you have to break up with me? Because that's what these boys at that age just don't get. They don't
Mm.
understand it. They don't understand why the girl and him aren't having a shared common experience in that relationship. They don't understand why the girl is having a drastically different experience in what is meant to be a shared experience,
Yeah.
right? So I said, so the problem here is that the boy doesn't understand why she's not happy because it's too nuanced for him to understand at that age. So I said, so I'm going to make a film where I'm going to write this Vikram and I'm going to tell the story through Bhooma's eyes so that he hopefully is like, oh, so that's why she's not happy with me. And he gets a chance to go back home and reflect, right? So, and and an extension of that is that these guys, when a girl breaks up with him, they find it very difficult to come to terms with it because they're like, I'm the world's best boyfriend. Why would you break up with me? And what kind of a woman are you where if you've slept with me and you now go get married to another guy and sleep with him? That's the first thought because you feel you have ownership and possession of somebody's virtue. And what you really can't digest is that it's no more yours. And the first thing you do is attack their character for it, right? So, in a twisted way, I get it, I understand it. So I'm going to write you with empathy and make a film so that you can go back home and reflect, right? So because these were my intentions and I knew they were honest, I never once was scared of it. It came from this. My necessity, my need to tell the story came from this, right? This gap. So I never once, and I knew my intentions were honest, so I never once was scared of it, or I was never once deterred by it until until the day I actually shot the scene where Rashmika sees the door for the first time.
Mm,
Right? I remember sitting down with Rashmika and having a chat and telling her that you know how if you're an actress, a lot of these boys and sometimes a lot of much older men, for some reason, feel a sense of entitlement to take a dig at your character. Just because you put yourself out there and you have a public life, they think it's okay. They think it's par for the course to take a dig at your character. They think it's okay to come and abuse you. Um, and sometimes they come and abuse people who aren't even putting themselves in the sphere of public life. That sense of entitlement and Rashmika being the extremely successful A-list popular actress she is, you can imagine the
yeah.
amount of abuse online that she's been subjected to, right?
Mm,
Sometimes it's for reasons like you go and work with who a fan considers a rival of his favorite actor.
yeah, yeah,
They think
yeah,
it's okay to come
yeah,
and abuse you. I
yeah.
don't know, for weird things. So I sat her down and I said, for the first time in this film, and for the only time in this film, I'm not going to have a conversation with you where together we're finding Booma's mind in this scene. I'm not going to ask you to get into her mind. I'm not going to ask you to allow Booma to inhabit you. I want you to be Rashmika in this scene. The first thing I did was we covered the door. And we didn't want Rashmika to see it until it was on camera. So the first time she sees that door, I wanted to be on camera. And and I told her, I said, every single time, Rashmika being the kind of person she is, she'll take all that abuse, take it in, and somehow manifest it as a smile and her way of doing this. And she believes in not dumping her trauma on anybody else, the unselfish person that she is. She believes in spreading cheer, even when she's in a horrible mood. And that's often drawing even more abuse. They're like, oh, she's so fake. Oh, she's cringe, and oh, she's why does she have to be cheerful all the time? Buddy, somebody's making an effort to be cheerful so that you don't know what they're really going through. But never mind that.
Mm,
So I said, knowing the kind of person you are, how much you make an effort every single time, no matter what your own mood is, to make an effort to be cheerful. I can only imagine how exhausting it must be and how much of a toll it takes on you. That coping mechanism that you have, I want you to do away with it for the next 1 hour until we finish shooting this. I want you to take that filter away and I want you to go look at that door and I want you to go think of every single time you have been unkindly abused by a random stranger who you've done nothing wrong to online. I want you to take in everything and I want to see your real, honest reaction to it. And I remember we wanted her on camera for the first time. So the first time she saw the door was caught on camera. It was the only take we did. And I had no idea what she was going to do. She had no idea what she was going to do. And the shot was that she looks at it, she looks around, she squirms, she can't even manage to look around. I didn't even direct it. I said, you do what you're going to do. I don't even know what you're going to do. And she looks around, she's squirming, she feels humiliated, and tears just start flowing down. And she doesn't even let herself break into a cry or a sob. She just opens the door and goes into the room, and we cut the shot. What
mm,
happens inside the room was a different shot. So she opened that door, she went in, and I cut. And I didn't even say take, okay, not okay, nothing. I knew there was something wrong. And I went and opened that door. I went inside because she hadn't come out. And that girl was sitting there sobbing her heart out for 20 minutes. Um, it hit, I don't know, it I think brought out something that was very, very deep rooted that she'd been burying and burying and burying. And looking at that girl at that point, I felt horrible that I had written that scene. I felt horrible that I had put this girl through it. And she actually, eventually, a little later, before pack up that day, said, you know what? I needed it. I needed to get that out of the system. You don't understand it, but in a weird way, it healed me. But just
mm,
watching that girl and how it affected her, I was like, my God, my next film, I just want to go make this really sweet, feel good, beautiful film. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to put actors through these kind of emotions anymore. So I think that was the point where I regretted it, but I knew it was important. And I had this feedback from so many women watching that it wasn't just Bhooma, that they needed that cry as well, that it healed them in a weird way as well, and that it was therapeutic. So yeah, yeah. Does that answer your question?
Wow. I have to also say another thing is that you take the gender roles away from such unhealthy and toxic dynamics. Like you mentioned, it is essentially about loss of control. And the fact that the abuser or the toxic person does not have control over your life anymore, it rattles them because they were so used to that person being accessible and for them to be molded like a sponge and clay. And suddenly, when that's removed, it's like they're trying to throw sand at whatever comes their way, and and do anything except to take accountability for how they've behaved. And that's exactly what narcissistic
Absolutely.
abusers are. And I think I
Absolutely.
can understand what
The only thing he hang on to in that entire breakup scene is that she's dumping me because I have 8 arrears. You know what arrears are? Does it work the same way in London? I'm guessing you were raised in London. So arrears are when you haven't cleared an exam, so you have to keep taking it until you clear it.
all right.
Uh, so he's got 8 arrears, and in his head, of all the things she told him, the one thing that made sense to him is that, oh, she doesn't want to get married to me because I've got 8 arrears, and she thinks I'm not going to be successful in life. No, no. So that's not the reason she's breaking up with you, but that's all that
Yeah.
gets in his head. So yeah, yeah.
Right. No, very beautifully said. If you think about it, and since we were talking about conditioning, and you referenced Devdas earlier, if you put Devdas and Bhuma together,
Hmm.
you'll be very surprised that there's a lot more in common than not. And the reason why I
Hmm.
say that is because Devdas, he became toxic undoubtedly much later on, self-destructive, everything in the mix.
Toxic to himself, though.
Yeah, toxic to
Yeah.
himself, whatever, conditioned to misogyny and all of that. Um, to an extent, Boomer has also been conditioned to misogyny through a different lens and through a different gender in that sense, She also वो जो एक बाप का जो एक प्यार होता है, that paternal love, उससे वंचित रही है. So she's also been, has that lack of validation in her life, that lack of love. She lost innocence at a very young age, a childhood that was lost. Devdas also had a childhood that was lost. But what separates the two, I think, is that sense of agency, and that idea of self-belief. And
Right.
what people, especially in today's day and age, they're so quick to judge and pass comments that this is a red flag, this is a green flag. Suddenly people want to gatekeep certain pieces of cinema because, it aligns with this delusional kind of sense of reality that people are living in. But what they don't understand is that there is, you've got to accept that sometimes some people are cut from the same cloth. Circumstances and a person's actual inner strength is what differentiates how they then end up becoming. And I think
Yep.
that's what I just wanted to make that as a point, actually, Rahul. I didn't have a question. I just wanted to
It's
highlight.
interesting. I am going to think about it after the interview's done. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but interesting you mentioned silence. And about the about Vikram's mom and Booma's, silence, kind of combining them together. And it's interesting because we had Mrs., which is an Hindi adaptation of The Great Indian Kitchen, and what I thought that film does remarkably well. Of course, Sanya was marvelous in the film as well. But is the use of silence, as a
Right.
metaphor as well as a cinematic technique to really
Mm.
showcase the type of suppression and the sort of how that kind of builds and builds and builds until there's eventually an outburst. Again, when that outburst happens in there, it's in slow motion. Even when what happens to Booma at the end when she throws the phone, it was the phone, wasn't it? Yeah, it was the phone
It
that she
is. It is.
again वो भी slow motion में था. So I think there's this thing happening in Indian cinema now where to showcase outburst, it's not necessarily loud background music, just a slow motion that really ironically symbolizes that build-up of suppressed emotions. And
Maybe. Maybe.
again, and
I
I'm not
mean, My choice of a high speed shot there wasn't thought through this much. It just instinctively felt. If you've seen my films, I'm sure you haven't seen the other two, but they're very different from this one. Uh, I almost never ever use high speed shots because to me that immediately just takes away from the reality of the moment and it
Hmm.
makes it cinematic, right? But here, instinctively, it just felt no, it doesn't work if I don't do this in slow. It's such a watershed moment in the journey of that character that it had to be sort of underscored or underlined rather by a high speed shot there of that phone flying like she's flung everything that held her back so far. So it's interesting that you pointed out. Yeah.
You know
Oh,
that.
here's another interesting tidbit for you. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to
Yeah,
cut
go
you.
on, go on.
So I've had the story of the girlfriend in my head um, for about 11, 12 years now. I
Hmm.
finally managed to sit down and write the entire screenplay. The first draft of the screenplay was written in 2020 Jan, about 2, 3 months before COVID came to India. And then sometime in 2022, I think it was, I think so, yeah. Um, I get a call from a filmmaker in Chennai, a Tamil filmmaker, saying, "Hey, there's this Malayalam film that's come out. It was COVID times, so the film did have a theatrical release. It was released on a native OTT platform in Kerala. So this filmmaker calls me and says, I don't know if you know because it's not a very popular platform, especially outside of Kerala. There's this Malayalam film that's come out, and it came out just 2 weeks back, and I intend to remake the film. So I'm pitching the film to you for you to act in the male lead's role, sort of the antagonist in that film. And that film. So he said, I'm going to send you a Vimeo link. Watch it and tell me if you're game. I want to go remake this in Tamil. I said, okay, send me the link. And I watched the link, and it's the Great Indian Kitchen.
Oh, no way.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. And I'm sitting here watching The Great Indian Kitchen, and I'm like, obviously, very different stories, very different contexts, and very different character arcs and things like that. So I wasn't too worried in terms of I knew I could still go out and make my film. But I was like, I wish I was the first to have touched this topic in India. But here's a film that's already come out. And here's the irony, I actually did the film. So I did the Tamil remake of The Great Indian Kitchen, which the Hindi adaptation is called Mrs., the film that you were talking about. So I play the husband in the Tamil version of The Great Indian
You
Kitchen.
did, you
So
did. Yes.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I kept thinking how I wish I was the first. But it didn't matter. It didn't matter. I knew it was a story that still needed to be told. So yeah, yeah.
No, beautiful. And I'm glad you mentioned that actually, because I was going to come on to that actually about your act.
Right.
Because I think for
So I
my
play a slightly different kind of a Vikram in another film. So yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
was gonna say, but no, but I think I'll tell you what though. What I really like is that from what I've known about you, Rahul, from the interactions that we've had over the phone and now and throughout the course of this conversation, is that you seem to be very compassionate and empathetic, to
Right.
all kinds of, I mean, when I say all, I don't mean all because there are some really effed up people out there, but I mean genuinely to, let's just say people who are on the slightly darker shade of gray on the moral compass.
Okay.
Even with them as well, there's a sense of compassion and empathy that you have that you kind of even try to understand that perspective to give a very holistic feel to your stories. How do you think that's really translated into your acting characters as well? I mean, I'm gonna only reference like two recent roles of yours I've seen, and I'm so sorry I've not seen any more acting roles of yours, and I really
That's okay.
but just
That's
to
okay.
reference from on top of my head, because I've seen those titles, is Sitaramam and Jigra, for example. Um,
Right.
Again, even in the girlfriend here, it's a very paternal role. It's like someone who's very compassionate, who's empathetic, who understands the female lens very well. A bit of a
Right.
personal question here, really, for you. But do you think, because obviously Chinmay Sripadar, your wife, who is someone who is an absolute formidable force in the music and film industry, she, it's, we know what she's gone through. It's been very difficult for her. But do you think understanding her perspective as well as seeing what that really toxic friend of yours did, do you think that's really helped you to give a very holistic feel, I think, as an artist as well?
I think not just these two. I think one of the greatest blessings I've had in my life is that I was in my teens and all the way through to my early 30s a proper, on one hand, a big sports geek, but along with that, I was a proper film and literature geek. Um, Luckily, this was the era, the pre-internet. Internet was around, but the pre-smartphone era, where you didn't have a smartphone at the palm of your hands, invading your life every single second with notifications, and you had a lot of time, you had a lot of attention span to do varied things, and I consumed a lot of cinema and literature at an age where I should have. And some of the films that I watched growing up, some of the films that I watched in my early 20s opened my mind. Um, and typically, I was a cocooned boy. My neighborhood, my school, that was my world. I was from a very normal middle class family where I wasn't jetting around the world and getting different perspectives and meeting all kinds of people. The only people I had met for almost 2 decades of my life were people in that small cocoon. And you're then, like any child, you're raised with a certain perspective, and it gets passed on by not just the parents but your teachers and your classmates and your the extended family and the friend circle and things like that. And some of these films and some of these books helped open my mind and open my eyes and realize, oh, there's so many different kinds of people. And sure, there are certain things that are common. The need to be loved, hunger, anger, desire, these things might be common, and yet they're so different. What motivates them, what shapes their mindset, what shapes their outlook on the world is so different from your own. And these films then start teaching you empathy. Um, and I wanted to be a filmmaker from the time I was in eighth standard in school. That's the earliest I remember that I wanted to be a filmmaker. And I think, like for example, I think it's probably not even one of top three Almodovar's films, but I remember watching this film by Pedro Almodovar in my early 20s called All About My Mother.
Oh yes,
And
yes, such a good
and
film.
I remember watching Grave of the Fireflies in my mid 20s, where you grew up, and I was a World War II geek, and I'd constantly be consuming information about the World War, and it's something you flaunt, that you have all the trivia at your fingertips. And then I watched this film called Grave of the Fireflies, and it's told from the point of view of two young Japanese children who are dealing with the aftermath of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Mm,
And these kids know nothing about politics. These kids have no clue why this war is being fought, but the bombs have orphaned them. And you start consuming cinema like this, and it just starts opening your mind. I'm just naming two, but there were so many books that I read. And luckily, something that was developed at a very young age, when I was still impressionable, when my worldviews hadn't yet crystallized, was to understand before judging,
mm,
to 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 absorb before reacting, to think before responding. Um, and I think it's held me in good stead as a writer filmmaker, because I do think they are important qualities to have as a screenwriter, or for that matter, as an author writing books or whatever it is. But anybody in a creative field where you're creating life and you're creating characters, I feel it's important that you understand your characters before you judge them. You understand your character before you make them good or bad or gray, white or black or gray. That you understand why they behave a certain way. And I think it adds depth to your writing, and I think it adds life to the film that you're creating.
mm.
So yeah, I have all those filmmakers and authors to thank, and I think it's something that all of us, we live in an era where your social stock is based on how accepted and popular, or how ratioed your opinions are, right?
Mm,
And there is this, clearly, this very inherent need to voice your opinion, just because we all have a platform now. And it's no more just that little wall in your neighborhood where you'd get together with five of your friends and chat about world and cinema and politics and sports. It's now one global village, all of us sitting on that little wall, and we all have access to each other, and we still don't know what to do with it. I feel like it's a new toy, and we haven't yet figured out what to do with it. We haven't yet figured out a commonly accepted decorum. And what it's done is that it's polarized us so much to the point that we can't even hear each other anymore, even though we're screaming. And that's sad. On one hand, I love the fact that there is a Twitter today and there is an Instagram today where I get to freely access the opinions of so many diverse people from around the world at my fingertips. And it also saddens me that we scream at each other so much and we've burnt every possible bridge that we can't even hear each other out without abusing each other, without name calling each other, without handing out permanent character certificates. And I am sure inadvertently or subconsciously, I've been a part of the problem too.
Mm.
I'm not for a second taking a high horse here. I'm sure I've been a part of the problem too. And yeah, I think we're all together as a species figuring this thing out, where we suddenly have access to so much information and opinions that it's the lines are now blurred between opinions and information.
I agree.
Nothing's ever neutral now. Nothing's neutral. Everything is tinged with bias and prejudice. And that bias and prejudice is great if it's on the same side as us, and it's horrible and dangerous if it's on the other side.
Hmm.
It is what it is. I mean, I don't know what to say. But yeah, I'm nobody. I'm just 3 films old, and I'm still finding my way. And I hope I'm growing and developing. Every day I learn something new. Every day I make it a point to listen to someone's take on something, and I learn so much. And that's all I can do. Keep growing and keep learning. But given that I am just 3 films old, but given that I am 3 films old, if there is a filmmaker or a future screenwriter or a playwright or an author listening to this, the one piece of I wouldn't even say advice. That sounds so patronizing. I don't mean to patronize. So the one suggestion I would make is that
Hmm.
understand before you judge. If someone's behaving a certain way, sure, you can judge it. I'm not saying don't, but
Hmm.
try to understand why they're behaving a certain way. Try to
Exactly.
understand how they've been shaped by their environment to behave that way. So yeah, it is what it is.
No, I honestly, I wasn't going to ask you this question, but since you brought it up, I think it's definitely worth addressing. And also, I feel like it's become from one global village to one global mob at this point. It's not even a
Two global
village anymore.
mobs.
Like
Two
it's like
global
this
mobs.
entire mob has burnt that global village, mate. It's not
Yeah,
even
yeah.
it's not even a village anymore. But anyhow, um,
It's chaos at this point,
yeah, it's a
but I am an
stampede.
optimist. I am an optimist, and I feel that whatever our age, we're all experiencing this for the first time. And I do think that with time, we will figure it out. I do think that with time, we will unlock its potential and use it right. Most of us, at least. Uh, Hopefully.
And the thing is, films are not above criticism. I think absolutely it should be normalized that you should critique films because that is
Yeah,
a
yeah,
job
yeah.
of a film critic. But the problem
Absolutely.
is that I feel it's the grammar, it's the lens, and it's sometimes it just feels to me that people are very unsettled when something, either brings to light a reality that they want to ignore, blissfully ignore,
Okay.
or anything that kind of um you know shatters their reality or their idea of reality. They cannot
Okay.
digest it. For example, a film like Kabir Singh, An Animal, right? Personally, I think they're quite entertaining films. And if you just separate yourself from someone who gets consumed by a film, then
Hmm.
then there's something genuinely very wrong with you. Because honestly speaking, you cannot blame an entire film that actually makes you end up reacting a certain way. At the end of the day, you've got to have a trigger within you that already
Okay.
has that. Do you know what I mean? But what I'm trying to
Okay.
also say is that having a film like, for example, like those sort of movies, and then having The Girlfriend or Mrs., they both exist in our society and they both
Hmm.
can work. They both can
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely be artistically represented. I don't mean to just spotlight these, but what I'm trying to say is that do you not think it's a bit frustrating sometimes when you kind of see these polarized opinions, and when people are not just enjoying art for art, and in a way, just so keen on slamming artistic expression, using the term dangerous, propaganda, and God knows what else. Some
Mhm.
lovely words in the English dictionary that people have used, and they're just flinging it around just for the
Okay.
sake of critique. So, how far is critique, and is critique even critiquing? That's my question to you.
I think, you know how some people say it's just cinema, big deal. I don't, I will politely agree to disagree with them because I think for the last 125 years, we haven't had an art form or a medium that is as powerful, that reaches so far and wide as cinema does. And cinema can communicate catharsis, cinema can communicate empathy, cinema can communicate so many things. So I think cinema is very, very important. And two, I feel critiquing of cinema is extremely important, as is critiquing of any art form, right? Art is truly at its best when it is a form of personal expression. So someone writing something or making something is making it as a form of personal expression. It isn't always the case, but whenever it is,
Hmm.
I think critiquing it is extremely important. And I don't mind even if it comes from a biased lens that the film critic is viewing it through. I don't mind if a film critic is taking a very extreme stand on that film and
Hmm.
telling you, articulating why they have a problem with it.
Sure.
When there is a problem is when we start abusing each other and be disrespectful in communicating that criticism.
Fair.
That is a
Yeah.
problem.
True, true.
Two, when there is a problem is that you start saying, I think it's extremely important for people on both sides to say why they feel something is dangerous
Yeah,
and why they have reacted to something so personally and so vehemently, why something triggered such a strong emotional response in them. I think it's great that that is communicated from both sides.
correct.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
when it's dangerous if you think the other side shouldn't even get to express themselves. That's when it becomes dangerous. I think freedom of speech, freedom of expression through art must exist on both sides.
Correct.
Go make your films. Go make your films, and they must be debated. They must be criticized, even if harshly, by a film critic on either this side or that. And I mean it generally. I'm not taking sides here.
Of course, no, no, no. Yeah.
I know which side I belong to, but I'm setting that aside when I say this. Is that we must leave ourselves open to listening to the other side, to consuming art from the other side. So as long as you're saying this film mustn't even get made, I think it's okay, even if you're harshly criticizing something. Someone could be harshly criticizing my film. I'm okay with that, as long as they're not abusing me, and as long as they're saying he doesn't even have the right to go make this film, I'm okay with it. I
Mm,
think it's fine. Because if we don't, some of these films that you talk about on both sides of the spectrum, all these films triggered lots of debates and discussions that got pretty heated as well, right? I learned so much as a filmmaker, and more importantly, as a cog in society, as a person existing within the confines of the society. I learned so much from that discussion. I learned
absolutely.
just as much from film critics who were taking a very strong stand one way or another. And I think they should be allowed to do that. I don't see any harm in it. And if as a society we can't even take that criticism and we say that either that criticism must be shut down, or in the case of the other way around, if you're saying that film itself must be shut down and must never get made, that to me is dangerous. Because the day you believe blindly that you are the only
True.
one who's right,
Yes.
you're dangerous. As much as I believe I very clearly belong to a certain side, and I believe that side is right, but I will respect your freedom to express that you believe you're right. And I want to be mature enough to be able to hear you out without calling you names, without giving you permanent character certificates, without abusing you. I want to hear you out. So if there is a film that is made that you find very disturbing and dangerous, We should all get together and talk about it so that we can learn from it. Because, like it or not, I'm sorry, I belong to that section that believes that cinema does have an influence. Cinema had a massive influence on me. So, as
Mm,
someone who was so influenced by cinema, how can I turn around and say, hey, it's just a movie, relax? No, it's not just a film. Cinema shapes perception, cinema shapes opinion, cinema shapes behavior, and cinema shapes collective behavior. There could be mob behavior, there could be very mature behavior, but cinema shapes collective behavior. I'm not saying it's the only one that has an impact. That's
sure.
ridiculous. Your parents, your the style of upbringing you were exposed to, the school that you went to, your teachers, your peers, your friends, all of these people are going to have a far bigger impact and influence on you than cinema does. Cinema
Mm,
comes way down the list, but cinema does. It does come way down that list. It does appear on that list. So I'm okay with a film getting made that is directly adverse to my opinions on the world. I think it should get made, and we should all discuss and debate it. It can even get heated. That's okay, as long as we're still able to be respectful.
of
And at
course.
the end of it, we can all say, hey, I politely agree to disagree. Um, and I think criticism should exist just as much. Their opinion could be wrong. You might choose to disagree with them, but let them come and tell you why this film evoked a strong response. Let
Sure.
them come and tell you why they find the film problematic. Hear that too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely. Do you know what? I agree. Honestly, Rahul, I think you've really hit the nail on the head here. And I think this is what I was trying to like kind of articulate, which I don't know if I did very well in my question, but I think this is what I was trying to say is that, you can have an opinion. You can dislike a film. Absolutely. Even if you want to be delulu about films as well, that's also fine, but have a conversation. I think that's
Yeah,
exactly what
yeah.
I'm saying.
I think
It's
that's
it
I'll take the beautiful example of Baby, since you brought that film up and you
yes,
seem to have seen it.
exactly. Yeah.
I personally think the film had a lot more room for interpreting it in different ways because I remember watching that film with two friends.
Yeah.
How I interpreted that film was very different from how the other two friends interpreted it. And I remember having a conversation with the filmmaker who's a very dear friend. He was very rattled. On one hand, he was experiencing this incredible box office success, way more than my film did, for example.
Hmm.
And he was experiencing this love and affection and all that money coming in and his stature growing as a filmmaker. And on the other hand, he was equally rattled by some of the criticism of that film. And there was this particular tweet he read that popped up on his timeline, which said, "How soaked in misogyny must this man be to write a film like this since his birth?" And it really affected him. So he reached out and we had a long conversation about it. And I told him, you know what? I see your film very differently. But I have a certain luxury as a man to be able to see it differently. But
Fair.
my truth is mine. I thought your film was a lot more nuanced than it's either getting criticism for or praise for. I interpreted it a certain way, and that truth is valid for me. But I do have the privilege and luxury of being a man. So I told him when a girl who watched your film in a theater, now whether you like it or not, I know the scenes because in my own theater, I saw the kind of men, I saw the kind of scenes that a lot of men, that was the majority in the theater, were hooting and clapping and erupting for,
Mm,
right? And it made the few girls in the theater extremely uncomfortable.
sure.
Now, I was able to block that out and say, I'm not going to pay heed to that. I still want to see what the filmmaker is trying to say because I have that luxury as a man. I have the privilege as a man. So I
Beautiful.
told him,
Mm,
you have that luxury and privilege as a man to make the story you wanted to. Nobody gets to say you shouldn't make your film. That's ridiculous. But I understand why a girl watches that film and comes out rankled and rattled because when she sees a certain section of men clapping and cheering wildly for certain scenes, she knows it's her lived reality. She knows that these are the kind of men she is surrounded by in the real world. She knows that she
yeah.
needs to step out of that theater and deal with men like that. Okay, so how she's viewing the film is very different, but that doesn't make it invalid,
Yeah.
right? It's getting a certain strong emotional reaction out of her because she is viewing it through the lens of her own experiences. And
Yeah.
how can you invalidate?
Mm.
You are as valid as you are in writing and making your film, and she is as valid as she is in
Feeling the way she does.
reacting to film a certain way. And these men, it's their truth, what they feel compelled to clap and cheer for. So if we can all just talk to each other, understand one another, we can all learn and grow with it, grow from it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Does it make sense?
No, it makes
Yeah.
absolute sense, and I think what you're saying is something that I agree with as well. Like, for example, there's been a lot of reviews on so many different films that have come out recently, which I have strongly disagreed with. That I do
Hmm.
think that has come from a certain bias lens and stuff. But does that mean that those people who express those opinions deserve character assassinations and, you know, hurled abuses at? Of course not. Nobody deserves that.
Neither side does.
Neither side does. Neither
And we
side.
as a species don't. You know why? Because every time that is done, we grow wider and wider apart,
Exactly.
and we burn bridges.
And ironically,
And
it defeats the purpose of what these platforms were made for. Ironically,
it
you know,
does, it
like,
does, it does.
like it's a public sphere. Like I remember learning about the public sphere in journalism, and this is exactly what the public sphere was supposed to be about. And the whole point is if debates become absolutists, then what's the point of art in the first place? And that's basically how I believe that.
I agree.
So no, but it's really interesting, and I love the fact that we brought this up because I think it's very, very topical at this current present
Uh,
time. But final note, Rahul, because wow, we've actually been on call for quite some time, but it's been such
Right,
a
right. I
lovely
didn't
conversation.
realize it. Oh wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's been
I
very
just looked at
long.
my watch and I was like, okay, man.
आज
Yeah,
बहुत
yeah.
दिनों के बाद दिल की बात कर ली like फिल्मों के बारे में. So it's been really lovely.
Yeah, I
But
enjoyed it, man. Yeah, beyond the point, I forgot that we were recording it, and I was
I
just having a nice
know, I
conversation
know,
with someone I
honestly.
feel comfortable having a conversation with. Yeah,
Likewise,
yeah.
honestly. And I think on a final note, I think The Girlfriend is such a powerful film that I actually want to see what happens in Booma's life now that she's gone through this whole process of self-discovery, which again, like you mentioned earlier, is that I'm glad it did not go to extremes. She did not suddenly become this someone who just snaps out of it and just becomes like, charging at, at her in her demeanor because, there was a nice consistency that you showed there. And
Yeah.
even though we got a bit
Mm.
of a flavor of what her life is after, she fought that trauma and she'd worked on herself, I think you should, personally, what I would love to see is how the girlfriend becomes the girl next.
Right, right.
Have you paid heed to a sequel? Have you considered a sequel potentially as well for
I
this?
hadn't when I was making the film, but I've had tons of people throw this question at me, especially because the film ends with a dialogue which says, "Na katha ippudu modalautundi." Um, or in Hindi that translates to "Meri kahani." The line that we used in Hindi was "Meri kahani, ab main khud likhungi." So everybody's
Ha.
like, "So what is that kahani now? We want to know it." Or are you hinting at a sequel? I said, "Whoa, I wasn't hinting at a sequel at all. It just felt like the right, appropriate finishing line for the film because what she'd been through has merely made her. It's now that her journey really starts. It's now that she's come into her own and she's now Bhooma Devi MA literature. She's no more the girlfriend.
Hmm.
She's shed that dependent identity, right? So that's all there was to it. So I didn't have a sequel in mind at all. I still don't. I've had lots of people come and ask me if there's going to be a sequel, especially lots of the women that I met in theaters after watching the film.
Okay.
When I was doing these theater visits, I'm just going to say this. I think the only reason Rashmika and I should go make a sequel is if organically there's a thought that grips my mind and starts taking shape, and it's organically a story that I'm bursting to tell, that I'm genuinely excited about.
Hmm.
And then we should go make it. I don't think we should make a sequel just for the sake of it.
No, definitely
Uh,
not. Please don't.
it's never a good reason to make any film. Yeah, you'd rather just leave it alone and
I
leave it
agree.
open ended. I love the fact that people can imagine what the rest of Booma's life would be. Let them be the authors of that. Why would you snatch that away from him and make it absolute when you tangibly go make a film, you take that away from them. And also, I've had so many people ask me, what happens to Vikram? How do you think he changed? Did he change at all? And I always said, I can tell you what I think, but that's not the truth because I want to leave it to you. And I said, I made this film so that a Vikram can go home and reflect and hopefully change. So I'd like to think this experience made him wiser and he did change and that he did grow as a human being and that he started questioning his own prejudices and bias and his own behavior. And maybe someday he'll find this wonderful girl, start dating her, marry her, and he made he would make for a wonderful husband because he had this experience in his life. I
Mm,
hope that's the case. I hope that's the case, but I don't want to force that down your throat. I'd
yeah.
like you to imagine it for yourself. I'd like you to figure out what the rest of Vikram's story is like.
Yeah.
So why take that away from people, right? So yeah, I
No,
said what I have to say. So
but that's interesting. I love stories about redemption, though. I think there is, there's something so like very fulfilling and satisfying about redemption. It's like, I've always referenced Bachna Hasino as a really good example
Mhm.
of that because, it talks
Mhm.
about toxic masculinity from a very commercial lens that's also very family friendly, but at the same time, it delves into the destruction that that sort of behavior pattern has. But yet
Mhm.
also, there is a second chance in life. People make mistakes. People are deeply problematic and flawed, but there is always a second chance, obviously, depending on how grave your mistake or whatever the thing is. But I think
Right, right, right.
this is the beauty, Rahul. And I think what you've done is that you've not only evoked a very healthy discussion about life, society. But what you have done is you've been so sincere in your voice as a storyteller. And I think this is exactly what cinema is about. And this is why the reactions have come so beautifully for The Girlfriend, because somewhere it also talks about a reality we all know exists, but at the same time, it's done so beautifully cinematically. And I think I'm
Thank
very,
you.
very, very, very proud of this film. And I think I'm very proud of your journey so far. And I think, God willing, you're going to have a very, very good career ahead, I'm sure. So,
How kind of you. It just made my day. Thank you. Thank you so much. You made my day with that phone call the other day, and you made my day again now. Thank
no,
you so
I,
much.
do you know what? When I just see a good piece of cinema now, like, Gabadao, like, it's like, you've conquered the world, like this kind of feeling that you get, it's like having great food, like great food and great films are so important.
I
Seriously.
like you, my man. I like you. You're a man of my own tastes. This very few joys that are as pure as watching a good film and walking
Exactly.
out of the theater and eating a wonderfully cooked meal.
Yeah.
Very few joys in life that equates to these two things. I completely agree with you.
So,
I'm a
yeah.
foodie myself and I'm a film geek. So yeah, I completely know what you mean. And to think that a film that we went and made did that to someone else, it's the greatest gratification I can ask for. You have no idea how much that made my day when you said that. So
And
yeah, because I've had that joy handed to me by so many filmmakers that I look up to and I admire.
mm,
And to hear someone say that something that we went and made's done the same for them is just so beautiful. I mean, yeah, yeah.
amazing. Well, look, Rahul, I won't keep you any longer, but thank you so much for joining me on Film Shilmy. It's been an absolute, absolute pleasure to have you. And thank you for being so open and amazing. Honestly, I don't even have any more synonyms to describe it. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Likewise, with equal intensity, I want to say that it's been an absolute pleasure. I had a lovely time having this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.